hello everyone, and a big hello and welcome to our speakers and all of our people attending our session today. So we're gonna jump right in. I'm gonna give a little bit of an introduction about our organization before allowing our speakers to introduce themselves. And then the remaining of the session will be a Q&A. So as soon as you guys wanna start putting in your questions, you guys can put them in the Q&A. It's a better way to organize questions so that they don't get lost in the chat, and we can have all of our amazing speakers answer your guys' questions today. So my name is Rachel. I'm the president of PreMedCC, which was a student-led organization that was started in the fall of 2021. And our goal as an organization was to create an online program for pre-med students at community colleges and universities with the hope of guiding our next generation of diverse and inclusive physicians. We know how challenging mentorship can be, especially in the middle of a pandemic. And Jubin, if you want to switch to the next slide. So while we advertise our organization for being for community college students, our events are free and open to anyone to attend. We realize that mentorship and guidance in a pre-med journey is very hard to find, especially for first generation med students or people that lack the resources. Next slide, Jubin. And one of the best parts about our organization is that you guys can do it remotely. We are in the middle of a pandemic, and so it's nice to be able to do things in the comfort of your own home where you guys are safe. And our sessions are typically on Fridays from 5 to 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, and occasionally we have them on Saturdays like we do today. Next slide, Jubin. And you can go one more slide. And so at the end of our sessions, be sure to take our quiz so that you guys can get the certification that you guys attended the session today. The quiz has 10 questions. If you get 70% or higher, then you pass and you get your certificate for all your hard work and the hours that you put in for your shadowing. And if you're not able to attend our sessions, no worries. We put them all up on YouTube so that you guys can go watch them, and then you guys can still continue to take the quiz. Next slide, Jubin. Oh yeah, so next Friday we have our next speaker. So it's on Friday, November 12th from 5 to 7 p.m. And then the following Friday, we'll have another speaker at the same time from 5 to 6:30 Pacific time. And then Saturday, November 13th, we have another speaker from 11 to 12:30 Pacific time. And all these events are on our website and also on our social media platforms. So you guys are free to sign up on our website. And be sure to follow us on social media. Our social media is the same for all of them. It's at PreMedCC. And at this point, I'm going to allow all of our awesome speakers today to start introducing themselves.
Why don't we start with Kim?
Hi, my name's Kim Bruiler. I'm originally from Dallas, Texas. I started out in the community colleges there. I didn't actually go straight from high school to college. I worked in between, and then started in community colleges, transferred to Rice in Houston, taught high school for 2 years, and then applied to Stanford, where I'm now wrapping up med school and applying into internal medicine.
Aminita.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aminta Kuyate. I am a third-year medical student in the UCSF UC Berkeley Joint Medical Program. Jubin, did you want me to do my full intro now?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, why don't you do that?
Okay, I actually have been in thesis mode, and I actually presented my thesis yesterday, so I went ahead and created a little PowerPoint as I was doing this. Sorry if that was overkill, but I'll go ahead and share my screen right now, if that's okay. 1 second. Okay, so I just wanted to share a little bit about myself and my journey to medical school. Sorry if this is small. Can we all see that? Is that okay? So like I said, my name is Aminta Kuyate. I am currently in the UC Berkeley Joint Medical Program and a student in the program in medical education for urban underserved communities, the PRIME US program. I started out in community college. I went to Berkeley High for undergrad, and I'm originally from Oakland, California. And then I transferred to UC Berkeley to major in psychology. I completed 2 internships and worked all throughout undergrad. So like many other community college students, like had to support myself financially. So I've been working since I was 16, started as a soccer coach and now as a human physiology teacher at UC Berkeley, even while I'm in medical school. I have been a non-traditional medical student my entire time. I took 5 years off between undergrad and grad school, where I worked in substance use, HIV, food insecurity research, and now my thesis is on anti-racism in medical education, which I presented at our symposium yesterday. A little bit more about me. I actually had a 1.0 in high school, and I really like to share that because I was really not academically inclined or interested in pursuing any form of education until I really got to community college. And that's where I really found mentorship and people to support me. I joined the African American Student Success Program at Community College of San Francisco, and that really kind of put me on a trajectory to where I am now. I also worked at the Women's Resource Center and the Alameda County Public Health Department throughout my undergrad experience. And I really struggled to find mentorship. I always make a joke that my first internship experience happened because I saw someone putting out lemon bars at UC Berkeley. And I was like, oh, what are y'all doing? And she was like, are you a pre-med student? And I was like, I am now. And so after that, I went to this event and I got my first pre-med internship. And that's kind of put me on the path to where I am now. But then I also knew that at Berkeley, I really struggled to find mentorship. I really struggled to find support. And because my Berkeley High experience was so academically challenging. We had a professor who only, instead of teaching us high school chemistry, he had us watch Mulan every single day. So when I got to Berkeley, I was really not prepared to take kind of any of these courses. So I knew that I was going to do a post-bac, and I actually went back to community college, which is where I finished that. And really, a lot of my letters were from community college professors. So I did my post-bac through both the UC Berkeley Extension and Berkeley City College. In my gap years, I did a lot of different things. I won't go through all of this right now. Sorry, I feel like this was a little bit of overkill, but again, I was just in that presenting mode yesterday, so I thought I would pull some stuff together. And then this is just some of the things that I've worked on since I've been in medical school. And a lot of this advocacy work and community work has been driven and by the work that I started in community college. And I recently actually testified to the state Senate on the pathway to community college to medical school DREAM program, because I really believe that we really need to be supporting students from community colleges into getting into medical school, because some of my favorite people in my medical programs have come from community college. And I just think we have a different perspective to offer, and so much we've done so much work in our community college lives to support our communities, and that has only made us stronger as medical students and future physicians. And this is me presenting my curriculum yesterday. So that's all. Thank you.
All right, let's go with Anastasia.
Hi, I'm Anastasia. I'm a 4th year medical student at UC Davis. And first off, I have to say I'm very happy, that there are so many of us medical students and so many impressive stories, to share. So I feel very lucky to be here with all of you and help answer any of the questions there are. A little bit about me. I didn't grow up in the United States. I grew up in Kyrgyzstan, which is a small country in Central Asia, and my family immigrated to the US when I was 18. And I went to community college and had a bunch of different jobs that I had during that time, and finally kind of made my way to college at Berkeley and did like an AmeriCorps fellowship, because initially I thought I was going to be a teacher. That didn't really go too well. And then I ended up in medical school. Yep, and here I am today, and I'm a 4th year, so I'm applying into anesthesiology this year and hoping to stay somewhere around in California.
All right, Aneri, why don't you go ahead?
Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Aneri. I'm a 1st-year medical student at UC Davis School of Medicine. Really glad and grateful to be here. A little bit about myself. I grew up in Ahmedabad, which is a city in Gujarat, India, and I immigrated to the United States in 2016. My parents are back home, but I had a chance to live with some family when I was here. And I attended Riverside Community College. So it's called Mount San Jacinto Community College in Riverside for 2 years before I transferred to UCLA. And like Aminta mentioned, I also was working throughout my time at community college and at UCLA. So I worked at a pharmacy as well as working on campus as a tutor to support myself. And if it weren't for my mentors and the people, family and friends who've supported me today, I would not be where I am. So I'm really grateful for everyone. And also throughout my experience, I also realized the importance of mentorship and how that was really hard to find sometimes, especially at community college. However, when I went to UCLA, I had the chance to build stronger connections with faculty and peers around me, and that really made my experience and helped me to get where I am today. So please feel free to ask me absolutely anything, from being an immigrant to volunteering, research, and about my experience at UC Davis.
Mary, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thank you. So I did have some notes on my phone, so I don't forget to mention things. So if I look down, that's what I'm looking at. I didn't have a fancy PowerPoint presentation like Amita did, so forgive me. But my family is originally from Armenia. I moved to the United States when I was 13, so almost 13 years ago now. When we moved here under asylum request. So for the intents and purposes of like medical school application, I was considered undocumented. So if anyone who's viewing this has any questions about that, I'm more than happy to try to help and answer, because it's really difficult for students who are undocumented to get through the process of even going to like undergrad and transferring. But before I get ahead of myself, so I'm a first generation student. My parents didn't graduate high school. Coming from a low income background, and I had no idea about anything to do with like community, like the college application process when I was in high school. So community college was kind of like my default. So I didn't really have a choice to like, figure out applications before, like while in high school. But honestly, I think I loved community college. I think one of the other panelists just mentioned that in community college, they were able to find a really solid kind of like mentorship, which was kind of my experience as well. And then I transferred to UCLA after 3 years. And I feel like UCLA was just such a big school. And it was really difficult for me to find mentorship at UCLA because everyone kind of seemed like they knew what they were doing. And at community college, it was just very different. And I feel like the professors were a lot more open to like kind of guiding us. I had a really great experience. I went to community college in Los Angeles in California, not in California, like in Glendale. So that's kind of where I'm from. And then while I was in college, I also worked as a server primarily. I didn't mention I'm a first year at UC Davis. I think you guys can see on my name, but I graduated UCLA at 2019, took two gap years. I worked as a scribe, and then I I was lucky enough to get into UC Davis for medical school. And I didn't decide to pursue medicine until I was probably a senior in college, so a senior at UCLA. So I decided really late, mainly because I didn't really believe that I could do it, or that I could achieve something like medical school, coming from the background that I come from. So if anyone has doubts, or anyone is kind of, going through the same kind of feelings, that's kind of why I'm here. Like, I'm happy to talk to anyone about any insecurities that they have about the process, or answer any questions at all. Like, there's no such thing as a dumb question. I'm here to help all throughout about anything that you guys have any questions about.
Thank you, Mary. Gabrielle?
What's up, everybody? So I think all our stories kind of intersect a little bit. I do resonate a little bit with Mita's story and Mary's story in regards to being an immigrant, and Mita's story in regards to not being a high achiever in high school. I played sports in high school, so they basically let me, move forward a lot of the times without really doing much work. So I basically graduated with, I think, like a 1 point something GPA. It was something that I didn't even realize you could graduate with. And I didn't even know that till I transferred from City College in San Francisco to UC Berkeley. So a little bit about myself in regards to that. My entire time, as I went through community college, through Berkeley, and entering medical school, which took me a total of about 8 to 9 years, I was working in the nonprofit field, specifically as a program coordinator with violence prevention, programs and programs that help immigrant youth and their families advocate for themselves, get programs, and navigate the juvenile justice system in a lot of instances. I also served as an instructor for Stanford University's leadership education for aspiring physicians for about 5 years. Um, and really interestingly, those opportunities were the ones that gave me the most, I would say, personal experiences that were personal to me and eventually really look good on my application. I think, like for example, doing community work, my first event that they had me go speak at was a violence prevention panel in the community. And the entire front row of the incoming class, the UCSF Prime was in the front row. This was, I think, in 2012, 2013. And I discussed a little bit about my journey. I didn't even realize that there were medical students there. They told me that I was going to speak at this event that day. And I Googled medical schools and I realized that there was one in San Francisco. And I was like, oh, they got a Prime program. And I was like, that looks really cool, right? I knew nothing. I knew nothing about medical school. I knew nothing about the journey. And I said, yeah, I want to go to UCSF and I want to, go to Prime and do that because that's what I needed. That's the thing that was there. And it turned out that the whole incoming class was there. And I ended up developing a partnership with them for 5 years. They got a ton of accolades and all those things. So what I'm trying to convey in that message is that do the things that are personal to you and are fun for you, and the universe will take care of the rest. Right? I believe that a lot of times as pre-med individuals get really competitive and try to get all these like fancy things and do all these fancy titles and all those things, and those things really don't matter. I promise you they don't matter. What does matter is the quality of the things you do. But back to the academic components, because I'm sure you're interested. When I went back to community college, I knew nothing in regards to going to medical school. I started from the very beginning. I had to learn how to write an essay. I had to learn how to do fractions. Um, I really was a product of social graduation, which is a thing where they just graduate you based on your age because the public system can't afford to keep every student in the school. But I went through City College San Francisco. I also attended Berkeley City College. I also attended Kenyatta College, Skyline College. I attended a few community colleges. I had the privilege to do a couple summers at Stanford as a visiting student, visiting scholar. And eventually I transferred to UC Berkeley where I graduated top of my class. So I think it's important to know that it's not about your background as much as like how much you want something and the opportunities that you have, right? I was able to make it to where the things that I did as a job connected with my path, right? And I always prioritize that. And that's hard, right? Because a lot of us have to work while we're going to college. And that really makes it harder to have the best GPA or the best Mcat, right? And schools take that into account. A lot of schools take that into account and understand that, right? It's something called distance traveled, right? But I'm currently a first year medical student at UC Davis and the academic research career for medical students honors pathway, which is basically eventually one day the aim is that I become faculty and include clinical research into my career. But me particularly, when I say that, I want to make clear that it's not about me sitting in a lab or doing research and then publishing all these papers, which is part of the career, right? It's more about me going into the community, knowing what the community wants, knowing what's good for the community, and teaching that to medical students. That is my focus. My focus is not going from the medical school to the community, but from the community to the medical school, and letting the community have their voice heard and represented, right? Because to me, that's the important thing. Yeah, if you have any questions. Oh, also, I was born in Nicaragua. I immigrated to San Francisco. So my entire life has always been around, beautiful, amazing immigrants. But unfortunately, in some ways, and fortunate in other ways, I've been surrounded by gangs my entire life, right? And I think that these are things that are not necessarily inherently bad, right? And I think that's a controversial statement, right? What I mean by that is I'm not judgmental towards youth and individuals that that turn to survival mechanisms to live, right? When they have nothing else, they may not have parents, they may not have ways to support themselves, but I am judgmental and against the systems that force us to do those type of things, right? So I just want to be very clear about that. So just to present a really honest and entire picture of what a medical student looks like, right? Like my first impression of medical students were prime medical students, right? UTSF prime medical students. This is not what the traditional, stereotype of medical student is, and that was helpful to me because the first Latino medical student I met had Chucks and a Pendleton on, right? So I was like, oh, that's what medical students look like. It's cool, right? I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to be a medical student, So any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you, Gabriel. Julio?
So I'm very lucky to be here. Gabriel, Mary, and Anelia are my classmates as first-year medical students at UC Davis. I just wanted to give a little bit background about myself. So I came to the US when I was 15 from El Salvador, and initially lived down in Los Angeles. So I lived there for a year, then we moved upstate. Just lived in San Francisco for 15 years until I moved to the time when I was documentary. So I went to, I wanted to go to college, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't know community college existed. I didn't know all of those things that I had to kind of do. And so I remember the way I got into community college was because I went to a bank and I was, how do I finance education? And the guy asked me, how do you have a social? Do you have, what do you do? And I didn't have one. So he asked me, oh, well, we cannot give you a loan. But he was, well, if you work, you can pay for your whole thing. So that's what I did. I kind of got 2 side jobs. I wanted to do medicine at the time, but there were a lot of financial difficulties that my family was going through. So I kept on working and decided to just in accounting. So I went to community college, and that's a lot of accounting, a lot of math. Then transferred to San Jose State, and finally got my bachelor's there as an accounting and finance major. And working for the private bank of America, I was just doing a lot of fixed income research, a lot of investments there. But I didn't feel fulfilled. I was like, something is lacking for me. There's something that I need to do in order to kind of save, help my community, the same immigrants that I'm part of. So I decided to quit my job at the bank and health. So
Hey, Julio, your audio keeps on breaking up. Your audio keeps on breaking up. If you're using your AirPods, you may have to disconnect and reconnect them.
your computer.
Computer audio.
Perfect.
Wait, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. So what I was saying is that I did a career change back in 2018 when I was working at the bank for finance and accounting. So I did switch to work for the San Francisco Department of Public Health in the refugee and asylee clinic. And I kind of did that choice because there's a lot of people in my family who also has asylum in the United States, and I wanted to help that community. So for the past 2-3 years before medical school, I was, and I had to do a postbac as well. So I was enrolled at the UC Berkeley postbac. I took some classes as well at the community college again. And I also did a lot of I was doing research on refugees and asylees at UCSF, one of the family medicine fellows at Zuckerberg. And I feel one of the hardest choices that I made besides moving to the United States was changing career, because you had to give up on income. You had to give up on a stable job, a stability that I had found while being, sort of undocumented in the United States. And I was like, okay, finally gonna give that up in order to go to medical school. People were saying, what are you doing? It's you're giving a good job just to do this, what you wanted to do. But sometimes that you feel like you have to do what you want. You have to kind of follow your path, and you kind of have to take some risks in life, and all those risks ultimately will pay off. And it's kind of like a thing that I have learned in this past year. So I'm being both, an immigrant, learning English, being undocumented, being moving to the United States, moving to San Francisco, and being a career changer as well, and being older because I'm 31. So it's kind of like a whole path that we all follow, but we're all going to end up in the same place, and we're going to be able to help our communities and do what is best for our families, communities, and the people I want to do help ultimately. So I'm very grateful that I went to community college, because it's given me a complete sense of meeting different people and being in an environment that kind of allowed me to find my way in the United States, how to navigate this whole educational system, improve my English, and pretty much be well prepared when I applied to medical school. So I think one of the greatest experiences being in community college and working while in community college. Without those two things, I don't think I would be in the place I am today. And yeah, so if you have any questions regarding, anything career changer, how I learn English, how Mcat preparation, all of those things, please let me know. Yeah, and thank you very much.
Last but not least, Mark. And we're kind of biased because Rachel and I are from Santa Rosa, so
Yeah, hey, hello everybody. Like, a lot of my fellow panelists, I feel just blessed to be here today with everybody, be on this panel. We got a lot of similar experiences. I can relate just hearing these stories, just as the audience is for the first time. It's like I thought I was the only one that did extremely terrible in high school. I never graduated, and now it took me a long time to be able to say that out loud. Even I eventually I got my GED, and then I went back to Santa Rosa Junior College. And Santa Rosa is where I'm from, so just 2 hours north of here. So I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be, pursuing a career in medicine and to be able to stay in the Bay Area. But I guess this thought popped in my head as we're all talking. We've been through a lot. We're blessed to be here, but we're really fortunate. And I don't know, to get into any medical school is an incredible achievement. So if it's like you don't necessarily need to get into the top medical program or judge yourself as a failure if you don't. It's the fact that you are worthy to be in medicine, and once you get beyond it, actually it doesn't matter too much, I would argue. And it really matters the entire journey will coalesce into you being a very impactful, empathetic, incredible physician for your community. I just wanted to say that. But a little bit more about myself. To know me, you have to know a little bit about my parents. So I'll just briefly mention my mom. She was born in Mexico. She came here for a better life, and then she was fortunate enough to be first generation and the second in her family of 10 kids to go to college. And that was where she met my father. And then they actually went to Santa Clara University. And then I came into being, and we went through, some struggles as a family growing up. So living on a tight budget, my father, didn't have a job for a while. So I just remember, going without, but not without ultimately love and foundation in terms of the person who I was going to become. So I really owe a lot to my parents. And then also secondarily in terms of career wise, I owe so much to my community college because they lifted me up and they gave me a second chance at life. Because I was lost for many years. Even after high school, I worked in construction. I worked for FedEx. Ended up working for FedEx for 5 years while I was going to community college. Yeah, the SRJC gave me everything that I needed and more. And I didn't really realize how fortunate I was to be at a community college until afterwards. Because then you realize you're not going to have as much support potentially ever in your in your educational career. I took advantage of everything there, and I'm so grateful. I remember Gabriel talking about learning fractions. That's where I started at too, because going back to school, it's man, I had to take remedial math, and then everything just basic to get those building blocks down. And then before I knew it, I was I remember being scared to transfer. I'm am I ready yet? I've been here forever, but then eventually just being propelled out because I got involved in the Nsf program. The Nsf program is near and dear to my heart. And everyone who's involved in that, pushing for transfer and making you have those plans and setting things in motion really sparked a lot in me. And I could go on and on. I got, as Aminta was saying, letters from my community college. When I applied to medical school, I hit my professors up because literally, like, I had the best relationships with a lot of them. And like, I love them. Like, I love them so much, like everything that they've done for me. So long story short, like I went to SRJC for quite a while. And then eventually I transferred to UCLA, like a few of us have done, and graduated in 2015 with a degree in microbiology, immunology, and molecular genetics, which is a mouthful. It's basically micro. And after that, I took a couple of years off. Was fortunate to do some traveling and then I needed more experience. So I worked as a scribe, as I think Mary mentioned as well. So got some more clinical experience and then eventually applied and got into Stanford by the skin of my teeth. Because again, like it's hard to, sometimes it's hard, as also Mary mentioned, like have the confidence, going forward. It can be challenging, like coming from all our various backgrounds, like having to surmount so many obstacles. And I was on the wait list for Stanford. Stanford was my last interview. And I was set to go to somewhere else. So I was going to go to the Midwest. And then they called me like in the middle of the summer and they're like, do you want to go here? And I was like, yeah, I can't say no. So I'm just grateful to be able to stay in California and stay particularly in the Bay Area and to still stay closely connected to all of you. And like everyone has said, like I'm here as a resource in any way I possibly can be. Feel free to message me, outside of this as well. So yeah, that's my story in a nutshell.
Awesome. The first two questions, does PreMedCC program offer resources regarding to Mcat? Yes, we have almost 3.5 hours worth of Mcat prep on our YouTube channel by a master Mcat instructor. So you can go and look at that. Yes, and the recordings will be posted on YouTube. Where do you do research in community college? Why don't we let Kim or anybody that wants to answer that one?
Yeah, so I did not do any research at community college. I, like everybody else on the panel, I think was working. I worked a full-time job selling concert tickets. I did involve myself in some of the opportunities at the community college I was at to get some behind-the-scenes experience. I worked in the chemistry lab doing prep, which basically meant mixing solutions. And I also worked as a tutor. But I didn't have any issues finding research opportunities once I transferred or sort of learning how to do the work. If you have the wherewithal or the opportunity to go out and look for research opportunities, if there is a university nearby, I do know of people who have pursued that if they were really, really serious about research. But for me, it didn't hold me back any to just wait and start my research once I transferred. And I was able to get a good letter and get a project finished by the end of my time at a university.
Awesome. This is another one. To anyone who held a full-time job, how did you, while you were in undergrad, how did you handle time management? Any tips or tricks?
I could talk a little bit about that. So I was very blessed in that it's like in the Latino community, unfortunately, there's not a lot of science majors, like that follow that path. So there was not many individuals that came from my background that were willing to work in the mission community of San Francisco, with that perspective, right? Like, so what I'm saying is try to get a job where you can leverage who you are as a unique individual and your unique path. And that way that job can be more flexible towards your schooling needs, right? I prioritize school before my job. But I know some jobs are not that flexible. So that was my experience. But if you can, do something like that, whether it's even if it's at your school, right? Work for Mesa, work for Puente, work for the lab or the library. Try to like think of ways that are creative where you can still pursue your academics, because at the end of the day, that needs to be a priority. Like there really is no way around it. You want to go into medicine, you gotta prioritize your academics.
Mary, do you want to answer that one too? How did you manage your time working?
I'm happy to. I wanted to, I can answer this one as well as just to add a little point for the previous one, because I did do research in community college, but I was fortunate enough to go to a community college that had two different professors that were conducting research. So we had the opportunity to apply for like a summer program where they were doing research, and I loved it so much that I went back when I was at UCLA over the following summer to do research again with my mentor, who's probably the greatest mentor I've ever had. And she has nothing to do with medicine. It was a microbiology research. But that was just because I was fortunate enough to go to a college that had that. But I will just recommend, if you really want to do research and you have no idea where to start looking, because it's really difficult it can be difficult depending on what university you're at to even get research to begin with, in my opinion, in my experience, at least at UCLA. Although I was able to because I had prior experience. But I think talk to your instructors, like ask, like if you have a connection or if you trust someone that's, you know, either a chemistry professor, a biology professor, it doesn't even matter what, if you like a professor, just go and ask them if they know someone that is doing research and tell them you're interested and you want to learn. Professors always appreciate that so much, and you never know who somebody has connections with. Most, like my mentor at my community college had so many contacts at UCLA, and she was so happy to connect us with people at UCLA. I feel like if she wasn't doing research, she would have definitely connected me with someone at UCLA if I was interested enough. So definitely talk to people that are teaching at your community college, because they more likely than not will know someone, and if they don't know someone, you're not losing anything by trying to ask them. And then with the work thing and balancing it, I was fortunate enough to not need to work full time. I wasn't paying any bills. I was just kind of working to support myself. So I had the luxury of kind of choosing my own work schedule. So during, you know, when exams week was coming up, I would take on less shifts, or like I would work only over the weekends. I know that that's not the case for everyone, and it's really, really hard. You know, I know a lot of people who had, you know, babies at home and they were working and they were doing community college, but some of those students are actually the best students in my experience. They end up doing being the top performers in my community college classes. So it's really just about your drive, and you have to, I don't know. I mean, it's very difficult, but you need to be very organized and kind of have a plan for yourself. I don't know, like don't let yourself be overwhelmed by the work that you have to do. Just try to, I was always the lecture learner. So maybe, you know, spending as much time as you possibly can in the lecture, paying attention, and it's all in your head. Like if you have the drive and you are willing to, you know, kind of prioritize your education in your path, you can do anything, you know, whether it's staying up late at night, which is not a good idea, but you can always find a time to get through it. And also, in my opinion, don't overwhelm yourself with the classes you're taking. If you're in community college, you can potentially take 3 classes at a time instead of 5 at a time and overwhelm yourself. And I would take classes that worked with my schedule for work a lot of the time, so I wouldn't have to drive to community college every single day. I would take, you know, Monday, Wednesday only. And then that's why I took 3 years to transfer. That's okay. I needed to take 3 years because that's what my schedule allowed me to do. I know people who took, my partner took 7 years in community college to transfer, and now he's in pharmacy school. You can take as long as you need. I know that sounds kind of scary. I know in my community college, everyone was terrified of the idea of having to stay an extra year and wasting another year. It's not a waste. It's what you need to do if you're working full-time, or if you're working even part-time, and in order to get the good grades that you need to transfer somewhere, it's worth it. So that's also always a possibility that you shouldn't shy away from just because you're thinking of losing a year. You're not losing anything. It's part of your journey. It's, if anything, it's very valued in medical schools, especially a lot of medical schools that, in my experience, really, really value non-traditional students who are a little bit older, because you have more life experience and you have something different to bring to the table. So just go with the flow of like what your life kind of permits you to do.
Yeah, I just want to jump in. This has been amazing advice from everyone so far. I'm putting a link in the chat to this list of undergrad internships and research opportunities that I kind of just share with everyone, because it has like research opportunities from all over the country. And I think like a lot of us, like I didn't know how to find these things when I was in community college. And so I just try to share that one whenever I can. I think a couple of things in terms of the research thing. I think that like all the advice that Mary was just talking about was so important. I also have always been like very strategic about like in my bio classes and in the classes that I knew that I had to take for medical school, being like, this teacher is going to love me. Like I'm asked about their kids. I'm asked about their dogs. I'm going to know everything about them. So at the end of this semester and every 2 to 3 business months after, I'll be just doing a quick reach out. Hey, if there's any opportunities, let me know. And this isn't like being weird. This is like a part of understanding academia and networking. And I felt like really awkward about asking for help in the beginning, but like in reality, they need undergraduate students to do this research and to support their work, and they want to support you. And if they don't, then move on to the next professor. I actually had a different experience in community college, and I really struggled finding research mentors and opportunities. So I was like, okay, I'll wait until I get to wherever I'm transferred at. And at Berkeley, it was like a very cutthroat environment for pre-meds. And I had literally had a research advisor for the undergraduate research program say, we're not interested in junior transfers because you won't be here for long enough to make a difference, which I absolutely fundamentally do not believe. But I've heard a lot of these messages, and I just want to share that like, I know people have heard these negative messages, and these are like completely incorrect. I really think that there's so much value in summer intensive immersion programs, either like the Stanford Visiting Scholars Program or the SMDEP. They had like a different summer dental immersion program. And so I knew that since I was working all through undergrad, I only could take the minimum amount of units. I worked up to full time. And I was also very strategic about what kind of work that I did. I had 2 jobs, one working for the Alameda County Public Health Department, where I worked like 1 day a week. And then another job where I was working in a restaurant. If you can get that mid-level fine dining where you work 3 hours and you get really good tips, like I really found a way to be able to make that work in my schedule. And then over winter breaks, I was working a ton. And during like the slower seasons in school, like when it wasn't midterms, I was really just like kind of racking up my money. And then when it was finals time, I really was like, okay, I need to take a couple of days off. And because that work is so flexible, it really allowed me to kind of support myself. So I think people looked at like the service industry and service jobs are so important, not only for our community as we see now in this like pandemic, but also I talked about that in my med school interviews. They're like, what is one of the most important things that experiences that you've had in terms of preparing you to be a physician? And I was like, honestly, being a waiter in a restaurant where you have to constantly have thousands of things in your head. You have to greet the next person with a smile on your face and understand it's about their service. And you have to be on your feet for many hours a day and still be a nice person at the end of your shift. So I talked about that and they were like, wow, that's a great perspective. And so I think whatever you do that we need money to live, whatever you do, like be clear about how it's supporting you in your path to medical school, and you can make anything sound important because it's important in creating who you are, and you are important in going into medical school. So I think sometimes people I wish I wasn't having to work, right? I'm working right now in medical school. Most med students don't work, but I'm a graduate student instructor at Berkeley, which has allowed me to reduce my tuition by like $40,000. So there's opportunities to do this at every level, but you have to be strategic, and you also have to make sure that your needs are being met as you're going through this.
And just to jump in real quick, if that's okay, when I worked as a server for 5 years, and during my interview trail, I've had interviewers at several medical schools tell me that they really value people who worked as servers before, because and word by word, one of them has said to me, you'd be surprised how many connections there are between server jobs and being a physician. And they really do value that experience because they know how difficult it is, and they know that really kind of builds character. So it can actually work to your benefit as well. And like you said, anything you do, if you can find a way to connect it to your journey and your purpose for pursuing medicine, it will work. As long as it's genuine, it will work for you.
Yeah, and let me just say that this is 100% true. I'm in my medicine rotation right now, and you're constantly running around seeing your patients, and like medical care, it's a service industry. Like but you're serving health. Like you're trying to comfort. You're providing care. Like these things, like you're just saying, like juggling like a million things in your head, trying to keep the order straight and whatever, it totally applies. Like I get it now. So just wanted to say that.
Yeah, such great experiences, and I feel the exact way. Anything that you can connect to being a physician is mostly something you can connect to being a better human being, and that's exactly what all physicians should be. We always strive to be better humans. I just try to be better than I was yesterday. That's the goal I work on every single day. And in terms of research, during community college I did not have the opportunity to do intensive research. However, there was a conference which was hosted by the honors transfer council, and so I got to present a little bit research that I did with one of my biology professors at the conference. So that was something that I got to do. And I think Gabe also put this in the chat, but I can put it again if it's gone up and you might have to scroll through it, which is the Nsf program. One of my friends actually did this program at NYU, and she is currently at NYU right now. So she had the opportunity to conduct research at NYU when she was a community college student. What you have to do is submit a couple of essays into why you're interested in research, and it's a really great opportunity. It also comes with a stipend, and you have the opportunity to build amazing connections. So if that's something that you're interested in, by all means apply for that. And even at UCLA, like everything that everyone's mentioned, it was sometimes hard to find research as a junior transfer because I didn't have the experiences that other students had. However, I ended up working in a research lab which was closer to my major. So I was a ecology and evolutionary biology major student. So I was working in an ant lab for a year, and then I did research on squirrels for another year. So it's not something which is directly related to medicine. However, I learned a lot from it, and I think the same principles can be applied to medicine, in which you're working collaboratively with other people, you're trying to come up with solutions together, brainstorming, all of those things. So you don't, again, necessarily have to do research in medicine to get into medical school. You can do research in absolutely anything and still get into medical school. And also, lastly, in terms of being able to work, I echo all the sentiments of all the panelists, is trying to find something that will work well with your schedule. So the pharmacy I worked at was really close to my community college. It was like 5 minutes away. So my commute was like super short, and I would just go there right after I finished classes. And my on-campus job, they were really, really flexible because they knew the time commitments and like the classes I was taking. They would always ask me to send my schedule for the entire semester before I started working. So they would really try to accommodate and work around that. And honestly, being a tutor has taught me so much because you learn how to be very flexible and learn how to brainstorm different solutions. And everyone is a different kind of learner. And you'll also see that in medical school. And honestly, it teaches you a lot about being a good student too. So I highly recommend that. And I don't know if anyone's told you this, but teaching is literally the best way to learn. So when you teach somebody something, that's when you realize that you've actually mastered it and learned it well enough to be able to teach. And it's a really, really important and valuable experience. So I highly recommend everyone, if you want to be like a tutor or a supplemental instruction leader, it's an opportunity that I gained a lot from.
So
The next, oh, sorry.
Sorry. No, I was gonna say something about the research as well. So I graduated in 2013. Like that's like almost 9 years ago. So I didn't do any type of research at all when in community college. I didn't do anything at the 4 years college. I was working a different job in finance. And what I'm trying to say is like, it's like sometimes we want to rush things, want to find things and get the things like done as fast as possible, especially when we're like in community college or, very young and we feel like the time is running out for us. I'll say it's like you will eventually find an opportunity. Like my opportunity came when I was decided to just quit my bank job and go work for the Department of Public Health. I kind of was put in an environment where I had a lot of people around me who were doing a lot of different things, working in public health, just working at being physicians, working in research, being fellows there. So you would have this opportunity to show up in your life as well. So I feel like it's not necessarily to just rush things right away and try to, we all want to like tick those boxes and we all want to like, have those requirements met, but you have time. So that's what I want to say. It's like, try to focus right now mostly on getting like the good grades that you want to do. If you're working, try to adjust your schedule. What I did myself, I was working like 2 jobs and 40 hours, one in community college and at San Jose State. So what I did is I took most of my classes either Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then I work from Thursday to Monday. So those are my working days, and the other days I kind of one in the morning to school and they use the afternoons to study. So there is time. I always the motto saying that there's always time to do things. You know, you will find a way to do that. And so don't feel like discouraged if you don't have anything right now. Don't feel like you are behind some of your peers that might be doing a lot more things than you. Always know that you know, it doesn't matter how long it's going to take, you eventually going to arrive to reach your goal. And we all take like different paths. You know, some people go more direct. I know some people in our class specifically, they just graduated last year and they went directly into medical school. There's some people like me that, you know, it's been out for 7-8 years out of school. And there's some people in between. There's very different experiences in a lot of these people that are brought together in medical schools. Medical schools do a good job of forming a class that's going to be able to bring all those experiences together, and everybody's going to learn from each other. So what I say is, like, if you don't have any research right now and you're looking, you know, you want to graduate and maybe take a couple of years off, that's okay. You know, take a couple of years off, find a job that will allow you to work something that you want to do, get that clinical experience, get that research thrown in, and you'll be okay at the end of the day. So right now, my advice would be, if you don't find any research, don't worry much about it. Kind of try to focus on your grades, focus on your like mental well-being, try to find like, you know, if you're supporting your family, find a job, adjust your schedule so it's a little bit more flexible for you. And I would always encourage everybody to, like, you know, prioritize yourself before you do any of the, you know, all the scholastic and all of the things that we have to do in order to get to medical school. Yeah.
Does taking all your pre-med requirements at community college look bad?
I did. I took all of them except biochem.
No, I think that's a myth. That's a complete myth. Let me know if you guys think different, but it's like same for me. I took everything except for biochem at my community college.
Yeah, I also took everything except biochem at community college, all of my classes. And I also agree that it's a myth. You can absolutely take all of your classes and even more if you want at community college. I don't think they look down upon you. If anything, it shows like resilience and that you were able to do so well in community college and then do even better at a UC or wherever you transfer to. So it just shows like your progress.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think the one thing I would add to that is, I don't know about you guys, but the quality of some of my community college science classes varied a bit. So while I don't think the admissions committees care at all where you took your classes, I think that if your classes are not preparing you to take the Mcat and they're not being taught at that level, just make sure you're aware of that and you're blocking off time appropriately. If you need to, like in my case, go back and reteach yourself general chemistry before you take the Mcat. But no, I don't think admissions committees care at all one way or the other, as long as your grades are reasonable, you don't struggle in your subsequent science classes once you transfer, and you have a reasonable Mcat score.
Sorry. In regards to that as well, if you take, for example, I took Gen Bio 1 at Berkeley City College, and I took Gen Bio 2 at Skyline Community College. And the way the community colleges do it in their school is they understand how those bios are going to come together, right? And it's going to flow nicely. But because I took it at two different schools, I didn't realize till I started studying for the Mcat that there was like a section that I never even like learned because I took it at two different community colleges. So even though it's transferable, right? Like all the classes at community colleges in California are they're looked upon favorably. There's no problem with them. If you take it at two different schools and they're a series, it's risky. And I learned the hard way about that.
Actually, and agreeing with Anastasia, I actually thought all of my pre-med courses that I took at community college were way better than the courses I took at UC Berkeley. The Gen Chem courses that I took were way more rigorous and covered actually way more material. So I think just like in any pre-med courses, there's going to be a diversity of the quality of the education that you get. I definitely actually got in an interview, which was the worst interview that I had at a school that I ended up getting into, but I turned down because they were so horrible in my interview. They said, why would you go back to community college after you went to a place like Berkeley? Like, isn't this a level of higher education? And why would you consider go backwards? And I said, and I was prepared to answer that question, which I had the most support at my community college. We had much better labs. I even had a picture of the labs at UC Berkeley that were disgusting and the labs at Berkeley City College that were sparkly and shiny and new. And I was like, literally just look at the materials we're afforded to like work with here. So I think that like, in all of these things, being able to speak from a strengths approach around coming from community college and really challenging this myth, I think is really important. But some people do, especially like kind of in the older school of academia, they might ask you about it, but just being prepared to say, like, again, like, have that picture of your lab, have that understanding that like you have phenomenal professors that teach both at Berkeley and at Berkeley City College. And some of these, I'm just able to take this class for $150 versus like $6,000 at Berkeley. So being able to explain that, I think, is really important. And also just knowing how you're going to study for the MCAT and what specific courses are your weak spots and what are your strength spots and where you want to take them, I think is really important. So I made sure to take my organic chemistry and my biochemistry through the UC Berkeley extension. And then the rest of them, like physics, I took at Berkeley City College, where I could really have more one-on-one time with the professor and get the support that I needed to like do well on the MCAT and that. Because I was like, I'm not going to be a doctor because of sine, cosine, and tangent, because I did not understand this triangle at all. And actually, that ended up being my best section on the MCAT. I tested in the 97th percentile in chemistry and physics, which, if you heard my story about never taking high school chemistry and taking all of those courses through community college, that's why I did so well, is because I built those relationships with the professors. So I think just being able to say that is really important.
I agree with, I mean, the like especially when she mentioned the labs at UC Berkeley, I did some of the labs at for my postbac university extension at Berkeley. And like when I compared those labs to some of the community college that we had at, at Cañada College, they were like, oh, what is going on here? It's like, why are those labs so bad? But again, like the classes of community college, when I was interviewing this past cycle, they were brought up. Some people asked me, it's like, you took these classes a long time ago in community college that were not science related. Why did you, somebody asked me, it's like, why did you go to community college? Like, it's like, why didn't you actually just transfer? Why didn't you go to a 4-year college? And I was like, well, I had to give him like, my life story and tell him, hey, these are the circumstances that made me go into a community college. And these are the things that I did. And I found that this was the easiest and the most straightforward path and what kind of like resonated with me. So I always think that don't feel bad if you go to community college. There's always like a reason as to why you're doing it. And whenever you're going to apply to medical school, just make that, like, if somebody were to ask you, don't assume they're doing it like in a bad intention. They want to like know why. They want to know a little bit more about your story. It's like, why you do that, because even though you see us all here in the panel that we all went to community college, when you go to those interviews, you're going to see that we're like a very small minority. You're going to see a lot of people that went to like Johns Hopkins, Duke, Harvard, a lot of those people in your interview cycles. And so you're going to be one of the few ones that are going to go there. And that's why I think it's like great that a lot of you are considering going into medicine, because we need to increase that number and bring about your experience into medical school as well. So always remember that your story is very valid. And the reason that you're doing community college is it's because what you're going to do, and you're going to do well with it. And just keep that in mind all the time.
Can somebody talk about postbacks and retaking a course that you did bad, like a C- in the course, or just in general, the different types of postbacks too?
I can talk about the postbac. So I did mine at UC Berkeley extension. So the only science class that I took while I was in community college was Bio 1 and 2, but I never did the labs. And I actually did have like a C- in one of those. I don't remember. I think it was like Bio 2. I don't remember. But I decided personally to retake those classes because they were so long ago, back in 2010, that I was like, it's almost 10 years. I need to retake these classes. And I think it's going to look better if I do it. So the way I approached the UC Berkeley extension was for me as my second opportunity to kind of demonstrate that I was capable of taking science classes. And a lot of my classmates that were also in the extension, they already had taken the classes, but what they did was not to retake those classes, but kind of do like a higher, like upper division, I think they call like the upper division class. So if you did like Gen Chem, they would do like organic chemistry, they would do biochemistry, or like, like more genetics classes if they already did bio class. So they wouldn't repeat those classes per se, but they would just do the upper division ones to kind of like them say, okay, maybe I did bad on that, but I'm moving on, and this is paint yourself in a better picture going forward.
Anyone else that did postbac?
Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. Again, I'm just going to keep talking about chemistry because I was so afraid of that class. I dropped it like 3 times. So I never really got, initially, I never really got the bad grade because I was just like drop it every semester. And then when I finally took it, I think I got a B- in Gen Chem, and then like a C. I definitely got a C in physics. I took a C in chemistry at Berkeley, and then I retook it and got like a B minus, which was like not a big difference. But when I think about the classes that I didn't do well in and the ones that I chose to retake later, I was very, again, strategic about making really strong relationships with those professors so that they ended up writing me letters. I knew that I wasn't going to be the brightest star in the biochem and biology sections of the MCAT, but I knew that I did really well in my bio and biochem courses through community college and at the UC Berkeley Extension. So I made sure that they wrote me letters of recommendation that could show that I had the academic foundations to do well in this course, but I might not just do well on it on the MCAT. So I think like balancing your application and being strategic about like, okay, if I didn't do that well on this in this course, I'll make sure that I shine on it on the MCAT. Or if I know that I'm not going to shine on this in the MCAT, I'll do really well in this course and get a letter from somebody who can like speak to my strengths in this. I hope that adds. I think there's a lot of different ways to do post-bac programs, and a lot of them are unfortunately very expensive. And that's why I chose to do an informal post-bac through the UC Berkeley Extension and take my courses at community college, because again, it would have cost like another like $15,000 that I did not magically have to be able to do a formal post-bac program. And I think Gabriel had a hand.
Yeah, I want to add to that, especially for you folks that are thinking about post-bacs. I've done a lot of like counseling for graduate students and pre-med students that want to go to post-bacs, right? Not all post-bacs are the same, right? And Aminta just said something very important, right? She talked about money, right? These things are expensive, and some will accept you just to take your money, right? So I'm not going to put names out there, but there are programs that will literally just take your money, right? So if you see a program that has 100% acceptance rate, no GPA requirement, nothing, right? Like anybody can get in, right? But then they don't have no stats on how many people get into medical school. That's suspicious, right? And I know that if you're gonna go to post-bac, you probably have a damaged GPA, right? Like, so there's also that balance. Like some post-bacs are like, you have to have a 3.2. Well, it's like, well, if I had a 3.2, why would I need a post-bac, right? Like, so just be careful with that, because these things are not, you don't get school loans for this, right? You're gonna have to dish out private money, and this is expensive, right? This is like a freaking Acura type money, you know what I mean? Like it's like a brand new car type money. Like be careful about that.
I also wanted to add a quick thing. If you're concerned that you had one C minus and you think that you need to take a course in post-bac to kind of remediate yourself and like show that you're doing better in the course, please don't do that. It is not worth it doing a post-bac. It's not worth retaking that class. I think the most important thing is for you to show that there is a progression, that you are, you know, doing better in other courses. That are like, yes, there is this C minus. I got like a C in Berkeley, and that was fine. That was one of the C's, and then I had like B's, and it didn't matter. I think the most important thing is that to show that you're still doing better in other courses, and bad classes will happen and bad grades will happen, but please do not take a whole year or like a whole summer to redo all those things if you feel like overall you have a good GPA and other courses you are doing good.
One other question is, and I'm seeing a lot of that. What do you do if you're struggling in a class, if you're at a community college or university? What's some of the resources?
Your professor.
Yeah, literally. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Gabe.
Yeah, like, okay, so like when I first went back to community college, there were tutors, and then there were professors in their office doing work. Like I literally would go knock on random professors' doors and be like, "Can you help me with this?" Right? Like they never said no. At Berkeley, they did. At Berkeley, they'd be like, they were just annoyed by my presence, right? But like at community college, it was cool. Like they loved it. You know, like professors are people, right? And know the professors talk about y'all, right? So if you're like cool, it's like, oh, that dude's cool. If you're like not so cool, they gonna remember that too, right? So like professors are, people too, right? But you're struggling, Mesa. Went to Mesa every day. City College San Francisco had this thing where they tracked how many hours you spent in the tutoring center. I didn't go to tutoring center like when I needed help. Like I went to class and then I would go to the tutoring center. Like I would just sit there, right? Like I had like 400 hours every semester just sitting there. I didn't go to the library. I go to the tutor. That was my place, right? Like stay by the tutors, right? Like they're there for that, right? Some people have like qualms with like, I don't need tutoring, or I don't need a study group. Like I don't need somebody to teach me. Like get out of here, get out of here. You know what I mean? Like school is hard, right? Med school is hard. Like, if you're not okay with asking for help, that's a problem. You know what I mean? Like, that's a bad problem too, because I need help today, right? Like in med school, like I'm totally okay with going to find a tutor and be like, help me with this. Like, instead of me bumping my head for 4 hours, 5 hours, and not being able to like sleep how much I want, or go to the gym, or like have like balance, like get help if you need it, tutors, Mesa, there's programs for you,
Kim, and then Aneri.
Yeah, I would say, I think for me personally, I think one of the things that was hardest about the transition from community college to university was I was somebody who'd always enjoyed school and done well. And at community college, I consistently felt very successful. And then when I transferred for undergrad, I went to Rice, competing against people who had done a full slate of AP courses in high school and who already seemed to kind of know everything that we were learning. So I did like physics, for instance, for the first time at Rice. I suddenly felt like I was way behind where everybody else was. And I think that was a huge adjustment for me and kind of a mental health challenge in some ways. It was a real shift in identity. But I'm glad that I went through that shift before med school because I think the unfortunate thing is sort of as you continue to climb the ladder, right, from community college to undergrad to med school, like it does get harder. And I think one of the things that I would say is if there's anything I could have sort of gone back and done my very first year at university, it is like going and making connections with professors before you need the help. A lot of university professors have office hours that are just standing once a week. And a lot of times no one goes and their offices are just empty. And they really are happy to see you. And I think with physics, I quickly realized that I was really going to struggle to stay ahead of the curve in that class. And I wound up going to office hours every week for an entire year. And even with that, by the end of like the second semester of the physics course there at Rice, I realized there was no way I was going to get anything more than a B. It was mathematically impossible. And, I remember sitting in the professor's office just in tears, being like, I've got to drop because I want to go to med school. I've got to drop. And he talked me off the ledge and said, you don't like this class. You don't want to do this class again, right? Like, is there going to be a different outcome if you drag yourself through another year of calculus-based physics? And the honest answer was no. And so I took it, I got my B. Nobody's ever asked about it. It's never been an issue, right? So I think for me, not only was it like I needed the help learning the material, but I also needed somebody to kind of push me through the difficulty of suddenly being in over my head.
I echo so many of the sentiments, Kim. I also struggled with physics when I first transferred from community college to UCLA. That was one of the most challenging classes I've taken in my life, and that was getting like a C minus. I thought that this is impossible. I'm not going to be able to make it in med school. I have a C minus. I have a couple of B's and then another C, and here I am. So don't be too hard on yourself. Realize that you're also human and feel completely okay asking for help. Even at community college, some of my professors, the ones I made a really good connection with, they actually did write me letters of recommendation for medical school, and they also helped me find which classes in community college I should be taking, because as all of you know, there's multiple teachers and professors teaching every single class, and the quality of the class does vary according to the professor you take, and that does affect your experience and also what you take from that class. So once I made a really good connection, some of the professors would tell me, oh, I think you should take English with this professor, or I think you should take biology at this time. And that really helped me a lot, because they were really supportive and they really wanted me to succeed, and they even offered to write me letters of like I didn't even have to ask them. That's how nice the professors were. So feel completely okay going into office hours and asking for help, because it's something that you'll have to get comfortable with very early on. Because even at medical school, like we always work in groups. Like all of my UC Davis peers who are on this panel today can attest that you cannot keep studying alone all the time. It's really effective to work in a group because you learn from each other's strengths and perspectives. And so feel free to also reach out to your peers who are going through the same thing as you are. Maybe somebody knows something that you don't. So becoming really comfortable asking for help, even say with your community college like transfer counselors, if they're coming up with your plan, be more proactive in that I get see planning, or like the classes you'll have to take, be more proactive and do more research on what you're really interested in. And don't feel afraid to ask questions, because that's how all of us got where we are, is that we asked a lot of questions. And I still ask a lot of questions today. And I feel like, don't ever think that your question is dumb or stupid or anything like that. We all have the same questions. If you have that question in your mind, I can guarantee you like 50 other people have the same question in their mind. They're just afraid to ask it. So just feel free to ask questions and explore and find what you really enjoy.
So I'm going to make this a really quick one. How many people spend more than 2 years at community college? Raise your hands. How many people took them longer than 4 years to get their bachelor's degree? Okay, so that answers that question. All right, Julio, why don't you go ahead, and you had something to add, I think.
Yes, I wanted to add something about the tutoring and just touch on the point about the letters of reference and the letters that you asked for the professors. So when I was at the extension, I was taking the organic chemistry class, and I was like, I don't know, this class is hard. Everybody's like freaking out. It's like, how could I improve in this class? And then one of the panelists mentioned that professors are people, right? And I have always enjoyed just like talking to like people and getting to know a lot better. So one of the things that I did is like, I just asked my professor to go and get some coffee. I was like, hey, do you want to just go to coffee? Because he was like almost my age, and I wanted to see why is he like teaching here? Why is his motivation to do things? So I just want to have a coffee with my professor, and then I just asked him, just like get him to know a little bit better. And after that, I did notice, like, because if you wanted to ask for a letter of recommendation, people need to know you in some way. You kind of just show up to the class and say, hey, at the end of the semester, can you give me a letter? If they had never interacted with a professor, they had not known you any other way. So I found that just getting to know them in a more, knowing about why they're doing things, why are these things, makes it easier to ask for help later. Like, so then I would send him an email asking to clarify a couple of points in the lecture. And he would reply like faster, and he would like, oh yeah, let me help you with this. This is why you're doing this. And then when I asked for a letter of recommendation, it made it a lot easier, a lot less awkward. He knew me more, so the letter, he actually showed me the letter before he sent it out, and it was like a more personal letter. And he asked me, hey, do you want me to edit certain things and things like that? And then it's like, it was already great, but it just made it a lot more impactful to get them to know, besides just the pure academic settings, just know why are you doing it, why, because everybody has a story, right? So we all want to know, like, why is certain people teaching, organic chemistry, which I would never do. But so I was like, why is this guy doing it? And so I think that's a good opportunity if they're, in class, you see them eating and stuff, and you want to join them for, for lunch, or you just want to just like have coffee with them or whatever. I think you should do that. It's a good opportunity to get to know a little bit better.
Mark, and then Gabriel.
Oh, I was raising my hand for something previously. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Gabriel.
Yeah, also about the letters, and there's this, you obviously want, everybody wants an A, right? But would you want to have an A, and then if you were a professor and you were going to write a letter, are you going to write a better letter for somebody that got an A that didn't have the best interactions with you, maybe was hyper competitive with their classmates, just presented just a bad vibe, right? Or something that wasn't like something you'd want to see in your own physician, versus somebody that got maybe even a B minus, but you've seen them helping others. You've seen them working hard. You've seen them put in the work. You've seen that their B meant more than that other person's A in their mind, right? So just know that there is a balance, right? Like, there's a lot of students with 4.0s and perfect MCATs that do not get in med school, right? So why is that, right? So just consider that, right? We're going into a service-related field. I forgot who said that earlier, but that is what medicine is, right? You're here to serve people that are scared, that are vulnerable, that need help, right? At a time in their life that they don't want to be in, right? What kind of character traits do you want to see in somebody that's going to be doing that, right? So just consider that when you interact with your professors, with your friends, your peers, with yourself, right? Like when you look at yourself in the mirror and you're struggling a little bit, like be kind to yourself too, you know, like it's just something I want to add about the letters.
Some of you have been scribes. Can some of you tell what a medical scribe is and how did you go about doing that?
Sure. So I was a scribe for 2 years. I started scribing right when I finished or right when I graduated undergrad. So when I graduated undergrad, I had essentially no experiences that were relevant to medicine. And I realized that I really needed to build my application in terms of getting clinical experiences and kind of volunteering more and all of that, because like I mentioned earlier, I decided to pursue med school very later on. So I had no background. And I was only like 23 at the time, I think. So I felt very inexperienced. And I think scribing was kind of the easiest way to get involved in a clinic and actually working, because I needed to work also to make some money. So scribing essentially, I think it differs based on where you're scribing, but as a medical scribe, it's kind of like shadowing a doctor plus documenting everything that's going on. So you are almost like their little assistant who completes all of their paperwork. You put in the, x-ray results, or you put in kind of, when in a clinic or in a hospital, physicians have to chart everything that's going on. So you are the one that's charting so that the physician is able to just interact with patients and not worry about finishing the paperwork. It can be very, very stressful based on like where you're working. I was working in an urgent care. I know it's more stressful when you're working in an ER, but the way that I went about it was just applying through Scribe America. Scribe America is like a big corporation that has locations all over the country. And if you submit your application, then I was lucky enough they reached out to me and were like, oh, there's an opportunity at an urgent care 15 minutes away from where I lived. It was perfect for me. So that's where I ended up scribing, and I really liked it. So I would recommend, I don't know, some people are not happy with Scribe America because the pay is very low, but I think it was really easy to get a scribe job with Scribe America. So there's pros and cons. I know people who worked as like privately hired scribes. So just like they just somehow found a physician who was looking for a scribe, and they were paying them separately, kind of as their, like the physician himself or herself was the employer and they were paying their scribe. Those people I know were getting paid a little bit better, but I know that's really hard to find a job. Like how do you even find a physician who's going to be willing to hire you and train you? That's not very easy to do. So I think there's several different companies like Scribe America. I would Google them. I don't remember other ones off the top of my head, but Scribe America is like the biggest one. And if you're interested in it, you don't really need any prior experience. In my experience, the only thing I needed to show was that I've taken biology courses, and you have to just go through training where they teach you basic medical terminology, and then you take an exam that was really simple and straightforward, and then you do a little interview. It wasn't that hard. So if you're curious and you want to learn more, like you can definitely just apply. And they really just want to see that you know basic science, and preferably have some kind of work experience so that, to make sure that you're professional and things like that. But I really enjoyed it. I think it's not something to do long term, because at some point you reach a point of kind of like maximal gain from the experience. But since I only did it for 2 years, it was okay. But that's a good way to kind of get your foot in the door, because I know that MA jobs are kind of difficult to find, and CNA jobs are, you need to get a certificate and things like that. And those kind of tend to be more impressive for application purposes. But if you don't want to just like work for free and kind of volunteer, I think scribing is a great way to start.
Anastasia and then Julio.
I just want to pitch in a very quick, maybe a little bit against being a scribe too. And being a scribe is a great experience, and it's kind of whatever you feel like you need for your application, it's great. But also kind of keep that in mind that you don't have to be a scribe to get into medical school. And so many of us are going to have scribe on their applications. Like, how does that actually, kind of make you different compared to like everyone else? Like everyone's been scribing, like this is great. I think the experiences that are going to matter is not going to be the scribing experiences, but it's the other experiences that you feel like are relevant, are meaningful to you, that you are able to talk about and connect with, how that, led you to medicine, how that made you pursue that. I think those are going to matter more than being an MA, CNA. Do not waste your time doing that unless, you're already on the path to getting that certificate and working. It is going to be a waste of your time. I guess that's what I'm just trying to say. And also take a look into other things. Like I thought I wanted to explore the teaching pathway before I committed to medical school. So I applied to AmeriCorps, and that was kind of a good mix of, I was able to teach. I was also like, part of my application was, still coming from the immigrant background. It was important for me to kind of give back to the community and work with them in that sense. So I think that fulfilled my application in that respect. So it doesn't have to be scribing, it doesn't have to be ED, all that stuff. Like, just take a look at your application and see what's missing, and kind of do the things that you like to do. I think that's the most important part. Do not do the things that you think other people are going to do, or everybody's doing it, all the pre-meds are doing it, I have to do it. Like, that's going to be the big mistake. You're going to look exactly like everyone else on the application.
Yeah, just to touch a little bit on that pre-medical experience that we always have to have before starting medical school. So I personally never did scribing. I never did anything like that, but I purposely look for a job that will allow me to work in public health. So specifically at the refugee clinic, and using my skills as I speak like 2 other languages, Portuguese and Spanish. So I was like, okay, what can I do with these skills that will allow me to also work with community, work in health, and give me a good experience to medical school. So it all came together because something that I feel like a lot of people don't look for is working with the local Department of Public Health, because that way allows you to actually do a very good impact on the community that you live with, allows you to see the broader perspective of public health. And I feel like a lot of schools now, they're shifting towards community health, and how can physicians improve the health not only of their patients but can be advocates for the local communities. And that's a great experience that I had. And specifically this past 2 years when I was working at the refugee clinic and helping a lot of the immigrants, one of the things that I really enjoy was during the COVID pandemic. And it was also good and bad, because obviously we had the COVID pandemic impacting a lot of our communities a lot. But it allowed me to go right into the where all these communities were impacted, and allowed me to work directly with them, bringing them food, supplies, allowing them to be tested, getting them vaccinated. And all of these things are things that I would have not been able to get if I had just been, scribing or just being in a clinic and all of those things. And I feel like they also made my application a little more cohesive, because one of the things that I tried to do when I was applying to medical school is kind of have my application be one whole seamless story from when I kind of first thought about medical school to why I quit my job, why I decided to work in and with refugees, why I'm doing public health work at the time, and how all of that shaped me to be at this moment in my life where I could go and apply to medical school and kind of transition from all my experiences, transition to medical school and beyond. So I think more importantly, what I'm trying to say is that more importantly, when you want to find something that will give you the clinical experience, or give you some public health experience, find something that will tie up with your story. And that's something that I always try to advise people to do.
Anastasia, Mary, and then Anari.
Oh, sorry. Actually, I kept my hand up
Oh,
for the
sorry.
previous one.
Mary.
Yeah, thank you so much to Anastasia for kind of clarifying. I wrote in the chat a little bit more, but I just want to echo what Julio just said as well. Scribing just kind of worked for me because it was convenient. Like I said, I needed something that will give me a income. So I needed to find a job that was, kind of easy for me to achieve, that was preferably would give me clinical experience, because at the time I didn't have any clinical experience or enough clinical experience. So it worked for me in my journey. That said, I don't think scribing is impressive by any means when you're applying. Lots of people scribed, it's not something that's going to make anyone that's reading your application be like, wow, they were a scribe. No, all it tells them that is that you know what a physician does on a day-to-day basis, which they want to make sure that you kind of know more or less what medicine is about. Because, scribing can be very mundane. And if you can get through it, then it kind of means that you know what a doctor does and you still want to do it, which it's kind of like just, they would want you to either have shadowed some physicians before or been in some kind of clinical setting to make sure that you know what a doctor actually does. If you have no clinical experience, at least in my experience, that could be a problem. And that's why I decided to scribe. That said, I think it's so much more impressive if you focus on your story. And like Julio was saying, what makes for a good medical school application is a cohesive, coherent, nice story that makes sense. Why do you want to be a doctor? And that story is going to be unique to every single person. And you cannot kind of follow a little like checklist of like boxes and tick them, kind of like research, scribing, shadowing, volunteer. I mean, that's kind of a thing that I think all of us kept in mind to a degree, because it's just what everyone seems to be doing. And there's value in making sure that you have all the relevant experiences that some schools are looking for, but it's way more important to have a story that is yours and being proud of that and kind of having that shine all throughout your experiences. So I kind of responded to one of the people's questions. I typed a response about like how to find different experiences while you're in community college, and like whether it's research or internships and things like that. I think volunteering is such a valuable thing to do while you're in community college, because it's kind of like on your own time, on your own terms, and you can find something that means something to you, something that makes sense with your story. So like my story, for example, substance abuse is a big thing in my family. So if I were to volunteer at a needle exchange program, which I was looking for an opportunity to do that, but I wasn't able to do that on time. Like it didn't work with my schedule, so I wasn't able to do that. But that's something that I really wanted to do. And it's not necessarily, it's very relevant to medicine, but at the time I didn't think that it would be relevant to medicine for some reason, because it wasn't in a clinic, which is silly. Not everything that's it doesn't have to be in a clinic to be relevant to medicine. So I also tutored unhoused children for a year. That was the most amazing experience. It was one of my most meaningful experiences that I put on my application because I loved it so much. Working at volunteering at an animal shelter. A lot of people I know in med school did that too. And if you're passionate about it, and if that's something that's interesting to you, that's all you really need to be able to talk about it in an interview and make that shine. And, but again, like if you can find experiences that make sense with what you love and what you care about, translating is amazing. If you can be a medical translator, you don't even have to be anything official. You can just be like, I speak Armenian, so I can come help translate. I did that for a time as well. That was so rewarding. Something that makes sense with who you are and what you are passionate about. That will stand out so much more than just scribing or volunteering at a hospital just for the sake of volunteering at a hospital. I volunteered at a hospital and I barely could really talk about it because I didn't feel that that was a very meaningful experience for me. So just do something that is genuinely, I feel like I've gotten this advice so many times when I was a pre-med, and it didn't really stick until after I got into med school, but it really means nothing if you're just doing things for the sake of doing them and checking a box. It's so much more meaningful if it means something to you. And then if by the end of it all, you're missing a box or two, but you have all these experiences that you love and are passionate about and are proud of, that's going to be so much more impressive for people who are looking at your application and interviewing you, because it's going to be unique to you. And it's not going to be like, oh, another scribe, oh, another hospital volunteer. That's not to dismiss the importance of those things. If that's something that, again, like I was a scribe and I did volunteer at a hospital as well, but those were not my most interesting or unique experiences. So just do what works with your journey and kind of like try to incorporate things that are part of you into it.
Mary?
Yes, so beautifully said, Mary. I feel like I agree with everything you said. I also ended up doing a lot of things which were, again, like true to what I am as a person and who I am. Um, and what everyone's talking about on the panel is like your story and who you are. It's also referred to as a narrative. So if you look on Reddit, I use Reddit a lot. If you look on Reddit or if you look on Student Doctor Network, all of those websites mention having a narrative, which is a story that you want to share, and a story makes what makes you who you are as a person. And that story is just accumulation of all of your experiences and everything that you've been through, and not all of it has to tie in very beautifully right now. It certainly won't. When I was going through the entire pre-med journey, nothing made sense. But however, when I was trying to write my personal statement, this was 2 months before the application was due, it started falling into place because even without knowing it, I was being intentional. Like when I reflected back, a lot of my experiences were from working with, say, the geriatric population, or with children with on the autistic spectrum, or with children with special needs. Like I was consistently working with those populations, even though I didn't realize, or I wasn't intentionally trying to work with them. That's where I gravitated towards. So again, if you're being true to yourself and trying to find experiences that really echo with and make you happy and bring you joy, because at the end of the day, that's exactly what you should be doing. If something is not bringing you joy or adding meaning to your life, then don't go ahead and do that. um, Opportunities for experience or things that you're trying to do, I think, again, like everyone said, there are some check boxes that you do need when you're applying to medical school, say having clinical experience, because that goes to show that you understand what it's like to be a physician, and you understand what a day in the life of a physician is like. So yes, I worked at a hospital, but again, that wasn't one of my most meaningful experiences. It was the 50 hours that I spent with children on the autism spectrum and what I had to gain from that. So that was one of my most meaningful experiences. And also working in a lab which was nothing related to medical research whatsoever. I was working with squirrels. That was one of my most meaningful experiences. And especially during a pandemic, when you're trying to find all of these lab opportunities and research internships, it can be really hard to try to find those. But at least from the clubs and organizations I've worked at UCLA, a lot of them have transitioned online and are still conducting research. And if anybody wants to like send me an email or anything, I can definitely share all of those researches with you and those opportunities, because a lot of them have transitioned online. And honestly, now starting of the new year, fingers crossed, a lot of them will be transitioning to in person again. So yeah, definitely feel free to do a lot of exploration. Don't keep doing something that you don't enjoy. I feel that you should be okay leaving something that you don't really enjoy, and trying to seek out an opportunity that might bring you more joy and meaning, and something that you can talk about during your interviews and during your personal statements and secondaries, because a lot of that is self-reflection. Like I got tired of reflecting. Like there was so much of reflection during my entire application year. The whole year I was just in my own head trying to figure out why I did what I did and how to make sense of my story. So you get ready to like do a lot of journaling and trying to be ready to try to make a sense of like who you are as a person, because you all are amazing, wonderful human beings. And yeah, feel very comfortable with your own story and sharing that, because that's what medical schools want. They want to get to know who you are as a person, not the checklist of activities that you've gone through to get where you are.
One question was about the imposter syndrome, and Aminta and Mark wanted to answer those, so I will let Aminita go first.
Yeah, I think imposter syndrome is one of those things that just comes up all the time. It's definitely something that you think you beat, and then the next day you're like, oh, you're back. And I think especially coming from community college, and fighting some of the stigma and some of the myths that have been shared already, it's really important to have a strong understanding of yourself and why you're doing this. I think along the pathway to medical school, like if you're not doing this for yourself or your community, like please get out now. This is tough. And I've really been comforted and bolstered by the fact that like I know who I am and I know why I'm doing this and I am important and I need to be here. I think especially as a Black woman in medicine, with having so few people to look for as leaders, but feeling very comforted by the fact that I've developed really strong mentoring relationships, that has been so important for me in fighting that as I'm going through this. And I think my mom, and I talk about this a lot, and what she has told me, and what has been really helpful for me, is that I'm actually creating my own standard, and that the only person that I have to be responsible to in these conversations with myself where I'm being really critical is to myself. And so if I am trying to compete with other people, if I'm trying to compete with my classmates, many of whom are just trying to survive, it's really not helpful when I'm thinking about what I want to accomplish in the medical field. And I think it's really easy to say of like, oh, just don't worry about it, or just don't think about it. But the reality is imposter syndrome is that like thing in your brain that loops, and it is a vicious, I literally named mine. My name is Jean, my imposter syndrome person who tells me that I can't do anything and I will never do anything. Their name is Jean. And I just tell them, you know what, Jean, you need to sit down right now, because I'm taking the lead and I'm setting my own standard for academic excellence and for professionalism. And a lot of that, I do want to acknowledge that we're like operating, and this is a slight change in topic, but that we're operating within a structurally racist system that is not set up for people of color to be successful. And a lot of students who come through community college come through communities that are most impacted by that. And so when we're coming into these systems that are telling us we can't, have our hair in locks, we can't have our nails long, we can't represent ourselves as our true selves, that can really be harmful when we're going through this process. And so what I am constantly supported by is the fact that I am a proud former community college student. This was in my intro yesterday when I was presenting my master's thesis research on anti-racism and medical education. I hope to be a faculty member one day to help support students from community college. And I know who I am and I know what I'm doing this for. So when I'm feeling down or when I'm feeling these kind of doubts about like, am I smart enough, or can I really do this high rigor of academic work? I know that I can because I have, and I know that you all can, because coming from community college, you have so many more skills and resources than you think. And actually, we were much better prepared to navigate medical school and college after because of the time that I spent in community college. You learn so many different things about, connecting with professors, registering for classes. I remember my first semester at community college, the only class I could register for was Russian 5 for native speakers. And I was like, I don't speak any Russian, but I can't seem to register for any other classes because there's a glitch in the system. And so somehow I got a meeting with this one woman who registered me for the 5 classes that she was teaching that semester. And that happened because I learned how to advocate for myself. And so in fighting this imposter syndrome feeling, recognize that it's okay that it comes up, but just really confront it and talk to it directly, and recognize that you're setting your own standard in a system that may or may not want you to be successful, but know that we need you as our colleagues in this field, and that we support you. A lot of us probably run different organizations in medical school. I'm one of the founding members of our White Coats for Black Lives chapter at UC Berkeley, and we run a similar seminar series. So that's why I was so excited to come today, because it's like, I'm actually not presenting my own organization. This is a different one. And this is the only time I ever wear my white coat, is at protests and at events like this. So yeah, I just wanted to say that I think for many of us coming from these different backgrounds and coming from community college, imposter syndrome is a difficult thing to overcome. And it's something that you absolutely can, because we need you in this field.
I'll just say lastly, I couldn't say it any better than that with that, but I just want to echo the fact that you are deserving of being in this profession, and we need you here. We want you here. And you're going to be a valuable resource for your community. I struggle with imposter syndrome. It's, I don't know if it'll ever entirely go away. Every step of the process, it sort of creeps back up into me. You get those doubts in there. Yeah, you have to kind of step away, step back, and reflect back. There's a mention of a lot of reflection being done throughout this process. And this is a good reminder for myself. I'm struggling right now, going through clinical rotations, feeling inadequate. Every rotation is like starting a new job all over. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like, am I ever going to be like competent, a master of, my craft? It's like, it's hard, but just knowing who you are, where you came from, and like what you bring to the table, and how like much of a meaningful impact you're going to have on your patients. Yeah, that's really going to help get you through some pretty trying times. And just reaching out when talking about these things, just in this context and other contexts and private settings, that's what you should try to do, and just ask for help when you need help. And one thing that I realized recently is like a lot of what has gotten me through like each step of the process, that I didn't really realize so much, like the importance of, is the fact that like I had really good friendships like along the way. And I just want to just reinforce that. And it may be hard, like when you transfer, like developing friendships, but I, as long as you have one, I mean, you're going to connect with other transfer students. We're going through the same thing, like having a someone by your side who's going through the same thing. Like that was probably the biggest thing that helped me out along the way. Like when I was studying for the MCAT, my best friend in at UCLA. We did it together, and she's in medical school now. I'm in medical school, and I'm still in contact with her. Excuse me, she's actually a first year resident now, an intern, and like I talk to her all the time, and like we still support each other from afar, and like it gets harder and harder to make new friends. I feel like we get so much more busy, but friendships, like, yeah, it goes a long way. It just people understanding what you're struggling through, like on the day to day. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Gabriel?
Yeah, man, so many amazing points, right? Like Gene on your shoulder, like literally somebody told me that like a couple months ago. They were like, you got to tell that person to calm down, right? And Mark with friends, like it's I'm very blessed with Davis in that sense that they've created a space where it's just I don't know, it's an amazing space. It's definitely it's an amazing space. But I was wondering if we could define what imposter syndrome is, because I genuinely, right, worked with so many medical students, like was mentored, had like was so involved in all these different things, and I literally didn't really truly understand the definition until like maybe like a month ago, right? In my mind, imposter syndrome meant that, oh, most medical students look like this, and I don't want to be like that anyway. So like I don't suffer from imposter syndrome. Like I'm not trying to be like the dominant culture in any way. So like who cares, right? But then once I got to medical school, like I caught myself saying things like to mentors or like different people, like, "Oh, thank you for helping me get here. I know that like you had a voice in me getting here," and like those ideas of you thinking that somebody did something to get you here, like that's imposter syndrome, right? Like I got into multiple medical schools, I had multiple interviews, right? Like, and I still couldn't get it in my head that that it wasn't because somebody did something. Like some letter writer wrote some magical sentence, and that's why I got in. And that's like imposter syndrome. I didn't truly understand that. Like thinking that it's because of somebody else's action that you earned something that you earned, right? And I just think it's important to define that, because if I, as a first year medical student, didn't understand that definition, and we throw around that term all the time, I'm sure there's somebody on this in this event that may not understand what that definition is. So I just want to say that.
So this is a question we're going to ask every one of you. I'm sorry, Julio, go ahead. I didn't see your hand.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I was gonna say something about that same thing that the imposter syndrome that Gabriel was mentioning about. So one of the things that I kind of like personally always like enjoy, I like to step out of my comfort zone. So one of the most uncomfortable places I ever worked with was in finance. Like working at a bank and being like in investments and all of the things. Everybody comes from like a very different, like wealthy environment. And everybody goes to like very fancy schools, and everybody was like the only person there got a different state school. Everybody went to like Duke, Yale, Harvard, and they all went to like fraternities, and they all, you know how the stereotypical finance environment is like, right? Like what you see in the movies, and everybody's like loud and very, very, very like that. So it is like that. So my advice would be with dealing with those things is kind of for me personally, work was engaging people that were very, very different from me, and like trying to interact with them and not just like closing them out and hearing them out and see how I would deal with somebody making me uncomfortable. So ultimately, I think like exposure to different environments like that do make people a lot more resilient and make you it's gonna prepare you for many things that are gonna come in the future. Like a lot of times that somebody's gonna be mentioning something to you that you might not enjoy, you might not agree. You're gonna know it's like it's not you. It's just like the other person. It's like you have to be like strong in that way and kind of always remind yourself that whatever the people say, it doesn't really it doesn't, and my point is like, it doesn't really matter. It's like up to you to kind of like shape your own reality. And I think that that's one of the greatest things that I learned from working at the bank and being in that completely very different environment. Maybe a more confident person, maybe a lot more confident in what I do and what I hope to do in the future.
All right. So the question is, what is one advice you would give yourself in your undergraduate years, and what it would be? And we'll let Kim start, and all of you could answer.
So I'm currently on the admissions committee for med school, which has been an interesting experience to sort of go back and look at it from the other side. I think what I would tell myself would be, one, don't worry too much about not getting all the checkbox things done. And I know we've all sort of touched on that. Doing fewer things better will be a lot more impressive in the long run than showing up for everything that you think a good pre-med is supposed to. And I wasn't able to do those things because I had to work, but I definitely worried about them. So I think that would be the main thing I would go back and tell myself. I think the other thing, there was a question in the chat about one secret about med school that you wished that you'd known. We talk a lot about narrative, right? And as though our entire lives added up to going to med school. And it's absolutely true that you have to do that, but it's not real, right? And getting into med school is such a big accomplishment, but your life keeps going while you're here. And all of the things that made getting in hard, and maybe for those of us from a community college background, harder than for the average person, those are still there once you get here. And I think you need to reserve some like grace for yourself to accept that just as in undergrad or just as in community college, school was not the single most important thing on your plate on any given day or even any given month. It's not going to be here either, unless those situations have resolved. In my case, they did not. And I think that that's the thing that I really wished I'd known is the incredible thing about getting in is you're going to be a doctor. The tough thing about getting in is you're still yourself. So I guess that would be my advice for the pre-meds out there.
Mary.
I think if I could go back and give myself advice, it would be kind of similar to what Kim was talking about, in just being more true to myself and trying, not stressing so much about the check boxes, not being consumed by like thinking of what do the admissions committees want to see on my application. I think like the most important thing is, again, doing fewer things and doing them consistently, I think is a lot more impressive than just kind of doing everything all over the place and not showing a commitment to anything. I think it's really valuable to find, a handful of things that you are really passionate about, that are interesting to you or that you like, and just sticking with those things instead of kind of bouncing around and doing everything. I wish that I took more time also. If I'm being honest, I kind of, if I could go back, I probably would have not rushed as much with my application process. I'm very happy to be where I am. I'm so grateful. I'm so happy. I had I'm so happy to be here. But I feel like it would have caused me a lot less stress if I just took more time, maybe took an additional year to kind of explore what I like, and getting involved in like, volunteer opportunities that meant more to me. Because I felt so pressed for time, because again, like I started doing most of my experiences outside of school, because I was in community college, I had work and then I had school. And so I had really good grades in community college, and then I was working, and then I got my Mcat score, which was a good score. And that was it. That's all I had going for me, is school and that's it. But you need so much more than that when you're applying to med school. So I think I didn't have the time. I felt like I needed to take more time ideally to kind of figure out why I'm doing this, and being able to show that with kind of tangible experiences and being able to talk about it more confidently. I think I was really insecure about not having as much experience as other students did. But I think what potentially made me stand out is my life experience and, you know, my immigration experience and being undocumented and kind of fighting through all of those and, like, you know, those challenges. I didn't realize how much value that had. And I think that really helped me kind of not stand out, but it just kind of like, that's kind of, I was always able to talk about that and relate that to like my community and wanting to help my community and things like that. But I think I wish that I took more time to get involved in the community and do things that meant something to me, so that now in med school, I feel like I would have been more confident in who I want to be and what I want to do. So I think it's really not just about getting into med school, even though I know that that's probably what it seems like now when you're still a pre-med and all you want to do is just get into school somewhere. But I think it's so important to figure out who you want to be as a physician, why you want to be a physician, like what that looks like to you. Because otherwise, if you just get in because you got in, it's not going to mean anything if you don't know who you want to serve and why you want to serve them. You're just going to get, you know, I don't know, I'm kind of rambling, I think, but I would have just gone back and focus more on things that mean more to me and kind of use that as like my journey instead of kind of checking all those boxes. And I would have just kind of chilled a little bit and been a little less neurotic, because I think that's really not healthy for you and there's no point to it. And I think some of the strongest applicants are people who took their time and were really confident in like the things that they did and why they did them. Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention something that Mary touched upon, was the consistency aspect. So one of the things that a lot of the people that I interview in this past cycle before going to medical school were about this one experience that I had in my application, which is I've been doing capoeira, which is a Brazilian martial art, for the past like 15 years. And it's one of the things I started like shortly, I think, when I came to US, and I still kind of do right now. So a lot of them, they didn't even ask me more about the public health department or my work. Everything was like, why have you been doing this thing for so long? That's what they said. And it boils down to saying that they, I asked, and so after I was talking to one of the interviewers, I asked, why do you specifically focus on this experience for my application and nothing else? And he said, well, because you have been doing it for like so long, it has to be something meaningful to you. It has to give you something, some skill, something that you truly enjoy and that has been able to guide you through all of these times. So I think a key thing to keep in mind is like whatever you do, regardless of what Mary mentioned, is to keep consistency. And if you can manage that for like a lot of years, it's going to help you as well in medical school, because when you start medical school, you'll see that it's a lot of it's just a lot of stuff coming at you and a lot of things that you have to keep focused and being consistent a lot. So I feel like that's something like very valuable. So stick to one thing, my advice, and regardless of what it is, just keep doing it, and yeah, try to do the best you can.
Absolutely. And going along with the same sentiment, when you're trying to do your best and trying to be consistent and trying to get all of your goals in life, it's so important to take care of yourself. How can you be a good physician and an effective doctor if you're not taking care of yourself? Like, how can you give from an empty cup? I think that's what I was told. You cannot give when you don't feel good inside, right? How are you going to be the best effective and the most happy and the most caring physician if from inside you feel uncomfortable or you're not doing well as a human being? So it's so important in medical school and during your undergraduate education to have very healthy coping strategies and mechanisms. I know there's like a lot of wellness talks, and it's really ironic, like, when sometimes you can't even make it to the wellness talk because you're so stressed out and not doing well. But it's really important to find the thing that keeps you going. Like Julio mentioned, that something that kept him going, you should find something that keeps you going. What is it that keeps you alive? For me personally, it's like meditation every single day, and also trying to go to the gym, working out, and spending time with my family. Even though we're all across the planet, my parents are back home in India, I still make sure that I FaceTime them every other day at least, because that's what keeps me going and reminds me about my purpose and keeps me grounded. So really try to find those things that you do every single day consistently. Sometimes you can't do them every single day, but they're important to your well-being, because you'll realize that very early on that burnout is very real and that it happens to all of us. I've been through it. I know that people on this panel can attest to being through burnout and how that can seriously take such a big toll on your mental health and well-being. So it becomes really important to form those connections, not just with like professors, peers, and like faculty, but also with people who keep you grounded, keep you happy. It might be your peers, it might be your family, it can be anybody, it can be absolutely anybody. Maybe it's your mentor, maybe it's someone that you really feel close to. So keeping those social connections and keeping those alive, because medical school is not a destination, it's definitely a journey, and it's definitely not a sprint. So don't try to go all gung-ho and then you realize that you've taken a toll on yourself and mental well-being. So make sure you take care of yourselves, because that's really important on the long run, and it's something you'll have to keep doing in medical school too, because it's important to be true to who you are as a person, and also be like the best version of yourselves, and that can only be possible if you're taking care of yourself.
I can go next. This is about advice that we wish that we had in undergrad, or like kind of at the beginning of the journey, if I'm remembering the question correctly. I think so many people have said so many wonderful things. I think the self-care part is so important, and not in this like we have to do these mandatory wellness things too. And I'm like, I would be well if you let me just like sleep. But our program has really done a lot to work to make sure that we're supported and successful. And I think that it's great, because once you get into medical school, like they want you to finish, like they're investing a lot of money in you. And so if you need help, like ask for it, and they really will try to provide it for you. I think what I wish I had known before is that I didn't have to make myself into this like cookie cutter medical student idea. Honestly, I've only become more radically like activist in my perspective since I've come to medical school. I thought that I would come here and I'd have to be like squished into a box of this like kind of professional medical doctor. And I'm like, again, like I said, I really only wear my white coat to go to protests. And I really like have been able to do so much transformational work since I've been here that like I wish I knew I didn't have to like kind of try to force myself into being smaller before I even got here. And I think that like there's so much work that I've done in community that I was hesitant to put on my applications, because they're like, no, like community work isn't as valued as a clinical experience. And that's absolutely and categorically false. I think they want to know who you are. They want to know that you are dedicated to and passionate about whatever you're dedicated and passionate about. I literally had one interview where all we talked about was food. This person had gone to like a West African restaurant and we literally talked about it for an hour. And I was like, I don't really understand how this is about me getting into medical school, but I'm having a really great conversation. And it seems like you just want to know what I think about and how I think. And so I think taking some of the pressure off of yourself of trying to be a mind reader and trying to anticipate everything that you need to know when you're in medical school is one. And this idea that you have to like learn everything before you get here. Like when you start medical school, they're going to treat you like a baby and be like, you know nothing. And here's your brain. We're going to fill it with all this information. So I feel like a lot of people took a bunch of extra classes to be like more on the cutting edge of medical school. And I was like, I'm going to like go have fun. And I am so incredibly grateful that I did, because I feel so bad for my classmates that went straight through who did not like go out and like enjoy the world. Unfortunately, you can't really do that right now, but if whatever way you can do it to be safe, like take breaks and like don't wait to live your life till you're in medical school or till after. And even when you're in medical school, make sure that you're taking breaks, seeing your family, and like connecting to why you're doing this, because otherwise you're gonna burn out real fast and you'll be learning about the cardiac cycle for the 100th time and really not have the will or desire to do it, which was me yesterday. So yeah, I think just like recognizing you can be a whole person, you can be a happy person and a healthy person as a pre-med student and as a medical student. I felt like I had to sacrifice so much and shove myself down, when in reality, the parts of myself that I thought that I had to get rid of were actually the most important in terms of me as a medical student now and the kind of doctor that I want to be in the future.
Gabriel?
I guess something I wish I knew at the beginning of my journey would be just be kind to yourself. Just be be well, right? Whatever that means for you, right? Um, whether that's meditation, whether that's capoeira. For me, for a while, it was like Bikram yoga. Then I moved on to more like the gym, and then now in school, it's actually been like more a lot. I mean, my faith has always been there, but like now in school, it's like a lot of trust in my faith. Like because the information is there, right? And sometimes we get hung up on trying to retrieve that information too forcefully to where we stretch ourselves out. So just allow your brain to work, allow yourself to be human. Know that when you get to medical school, like similar to like what Amita said was they will like teach you everything as if you know nothing. And it's really nice because all the gaps are starting to get filled in of the things that I didn't know or didn't fully understand. And similar to what she mentioned, I'm learning the citric acid cycle for like the 20th, 30th time. Had an exam where like they're asking about osmotic pressure, and I'm like, how is it that we're like in medical school and some of us are still getting this wrong, right? Like, including myself, right? So I'm gonna put like this is these concepts, like you'll never stop learning, right? That's what you're signing up for. So figure out how to do that in a way where you can still have a life, right? Because you're more than a medical student and a doctor. You're gonna be a partner, potentially a parent, a community member, a teacher. Like there's all these different roles that you're going to be that require the same amount, if not more, of your time, right? So be a complete human, and that'll shine on your application. Um, I think that's important.
Julio? All right, so we don't have any questions, and we're gonna, if any of the medical students have one last words of wisdom to say before we go, please do so. Go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, I just want to say that you all are absolutely incredible and amazing human beings. Believe in yourself because everyone around you and everyone who supports you wants you to succeed. We all want you to succeed. We want you to be our peers. We want you to be our colleagues. So just believe in yourself and do the best you can do. And be very true and very kind to yourself because this is a long journey. Don't hate on yourself. Tell that imposter to go away. Um, just be true to who you are as a person, and that will shine through. And if you need absolutely anything, if you want to chat about anything related to medicine, not related to medicine, feel free to email me. I linked my email on the chat.